always wanted to have kids, and I think that also makes sense with what my mom like passed on to me about, you know, giving birth and being a mom. Like I think she really loved being a mom. So from how far as I remember, I've always wanted to be a mom.
Infertility has a very specific diagnosis in the insurance world, how we code. And the diagnosis of infertility is technically 12 months of unprotected, appropriately timed intercourse without a pregnancy.
So my definition of infertility, actually I'd like to call it fertility challenged versus infertility. The medical community refers to it as infertility, and the way they describe infertility is that within a year, if a woman under 35 is not, if she hasn't conceived yet, she is considered infertile. If she's over 35 and within 6 months, if they haven't conceived, she is infertile, and then over 40, if it hasn't been 3 months, if she hasn't conceived, then she is considered infertile.
Fertility challenge could include couples who don't need to engage in fertility treatment. They simply need to keep trying for a little bit longer. And in fact, physicians will often tell their patients if they're young and haven't tried for a year that they need to go and try for another couple of months before they come back in for fertility treatment, because the most common thing that couples mess up when they're trying to get pregnant is timing.
It's been a year and 3 months now that I stopped taking contraceptives.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Sure, whatever you say. Sounds good.
Even when people are given a diagnosis of infertility, of you know, being sterile, it doesn't mean that all hope is gone.
So normally the egg and the sperm fertilize in the tube. They meet each other in the tube, the fallopian tube of a woman, and that's where fertilization takes place. And then the fertilized egg grows into an embryo, and that goes into the uterine cavity and implants into the uterus, and the pregnancy starts to grow there and stays there. In IUI, in intrauterine insemination, we actually we don't take out the eggs, we just put more sperm closer to the egg.
They decided to do an IUI, which is putting my sperms into my uterus, like with medical assistance, and that failed. That was last month. So now we're going to do an IVF.
In vitro fertilization, which is a lot higher success rate, and we're going to be doing that in April.
Yeah.
And in 1 month, I believe.
Yeah.
IVF is in vitro fertilization, and that means literally in vitro means in glass, so in a glass dish fertilization, so outside of the body.
I don't understand even yet. What is this artificial insemination thing? Have you ever heard of it before, George?
The term test tube babies is an old term that really came into existence when IVF was in its infancy. I think because society did not understand what was happening in IVF, I think people actually believed that babies were being made, like full-grown babies, somehow in test tubes.
You are not recreating yourself in another person. It's just like what happens with a couple when they make a baby. You know, there's his sperm, her egg, and they make an embryo. And it's just like any other healthy baby that's being created in a different way. That's the difference.
The term was created out of fear. Babies are not created in test tubes. In fact, test tubes are not used typically in the creation of embryos. It's a petri dish. Now we're going to call them petri dish babies. But it's the egg and sperm that are turned into the embryo in a petri dish. And an embryo is only 3 to 5 days old. It still just looks like a couple of cells when it's transferred into a woman's body.
Of course, everybody wants to just make the baby naturally and in the bedroom. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's easier. It's, you know, it's not clinical. and you don't have to take people's blood and you know, go to the doctors before you go to work.
I can't work out, I can't move, we have a lot of restrictions, I have special diets, and I just feel like not in a good place in my body. And apparently it's normal according to the doctors, but it is not easy. It is like a change in your life.
Infertility is another type of trauma that's very personal for women, that is also not often talked about or taken by non-infertile people very seriously.
I tend to offer my patients support, psychological support, just so that they know that we care more. It's not just the biology of what we're doing, but it's actually seeing them as a couple and wanting them to be able to get through the treatment process without being too stressed out or too overwhelmed.
Mike's been really awesome for that, for calming me down and be like, putting things in perspective, be like, it's only been 2 months that we've trying and it's not that long and I'll come. So it's good, yeah, we're lucky to have each other, I guess.
You know, then if she gets a negative pregnancy result, all of that effort, and she feels sad. So this kind of cycle, and then she gets herself all pumped up again, and the anxiety starts to increase. And, you know, so there's this kind of a cycle of hope and despair that I see before we finally get to, you know, she's pregnant.
We didn't want to do it originally, but that's kind of, after talking to our doctor, it was just the next step. And, you know, we figured if it's made in the lab, it'll be like a super baby and be 7 feet tall and, you know, really strong.
There are some people who feel that IVF is taking something that is controlled by higher powers and attempting to put it in human hands.
Like, when you talk to the doctor, you can tell that they're really, they're not playing God, they're not playing witches or whatever. They're really just trying and help out people that need help, but they're not doing anything unethical at all, and they're really serious about the ethics, and I really appreciate that.
Once that embryo's in there, we all go like this. We have no idea if that embryo is good enough to hatch out of its shell, implant into the uterine wall, and continue cell division. If you believe in a higher power, that part would be up to God. If it's in God's plan for IVF to work, then it will work. If it's not in God's plan for IVF to work, then it will not.
On the one hand, it is about medicine and the preciseness and, you know, the hormones and the different drugs some women are taking, but it's also an art. So it's like the perfect word, because every time that a doctor is working with a patient, she or he is doing it in a different way and is trying to find kind of the right cocktail, so to speak, the hormonal cocktail for the couple to make it work. And it can take several tries to get it just right. So they're artists and they're doctors.
I think that it's 2014 and we have the science that helps people who need it, and there's no reason why we shouldn't use it.
So, you know, to the group that doesn't believe in what I do, I would say, well, you certainly don't have to utilize it. But I know that I know the number of lives that I've changed, the number of families I created, and that's God's work as well. So,
even though it's medically assisted, it enables you to have like your own baby and to also be able to carry the baby yourself.
It's such an isolating experience, you know, to be going through this. So many people feel so alone. I've even heard of a woman who took her life because of this. It is not necessary. There are people out there that are also in this pain, and when we come together, we can support each other And you know, it takes some time. If you could let go of when and how it's going to happen, and just open your heart and open your mind to that it will happen.